Hello, and welcome back to Void Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy the Void Whispers that creep in during the dead of night, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, our town, sat deep inside a closed mountain valley, hidden away from the rest of the world like a place that had been forgotten on purpose. Tall rocky peaks surrounded us from every side, so high and sharp that when the sun rose, its light reached us late. And when evening came, darkness fell over us early. There was only one path leading out of town, and calling it a road would have been too generous. It was more like a narrow cut between the mountains, twisting along cliffs and trees, barely wide enough for a motorcycle or a bicycle. Even the smallest car could not pass through it without getting stuck or scraping against the rocks. Because of that, almost everyone in town learned how to ride a motorcycle or a bike at a young age. The only people who did not know how were very small children and a few old people who had already given up going anywhere far. I knew how to ride a motorcycle too, even though I was only 10 years old. In most places, that would have been crazy, maybe even illegal. But in our town, there were no police officers watching the streets, no traffic lights, and no one who cared enough to stop a kid from riding around. People would shake their heads when they saw me, but they never did anything about it. I was proud of it. I liked the way the engine sounded under me, the way the whole town seemed smaller when I could ride from one end to the other in minutes. Sometimes I even brought my motorcycle keys to school and spun them around my finger like I was much older than I really was. The teachers hated it. They would frown, sigh, and tell me I was going to get myself killed one day. I always laughed it off. Back then, I thought the motorcycle was the most dangerous thing in my life. I had no idea how wrong I was. This was long before food delivery apps, before you could tap a phone and have anything brought to your door. In our town, getting supplies was always difficult. There were only two real options. One was to ride a motorcycle or bicycle down the narrow mountain path to the parking lot outside the valley. From there, someone could get into a car and drive to the nearest supermarket. That whole trip took time, strength, and money, and no one did it, unless they had to. The other option was Paul's grocery store. Paul was one of the most respected people in town. He ran the only business we had, a small grocery store near the center road. It was not fancy. The shelves were old, the lights flickered, and the floorboards creaked in certain spots. But Paul kept the town alive. He brought in flour, canned food, batteries, soap, medicine, candy, and everything else people needed. The journey to bring all those supplies into town was hard, expensive, and tiring. But somehow, he kept his prices fair. Things in his store cost a little more than they did outside the valley, but not much more. Everyone knew he could have charged double if he wanted to. He never did. Because of that, people trusted him. They greeted him warmly in the street. They helped unload his supplies when he came back from a trip. They brought him food when he got sick. His son, Dan, was my neighbor and my classmate, so I had spent a lot of time in that store. Sometimes Dan and I would sit behind the counter, pretending we were in charge, while Paul worked in the back. For as long as I could remember, Paul's grocery store had been the only business in town. Then the man selling Zenka bars arrived. I still remember the exact day he came, because nothing about it felt normal. There had been no warning. No one had heard an engine. No one had seen him coming down the mountain path. 1 minute, the entrance to town was empty. The next, he was standing there like he had stepped out of thin air. He wore a purple top hat and a long purple coat that reached almost to his knees. His boots were shiny black, and his mustache curled at the ends in a way that looked almost fake. He was pulling a large cart behind him, but calling it a cart did not make sense. It was taller and wider than a car, with wooden sides painted in a deep purple color. It completely blocked the path out of town. People noticed him right away. In a place as small as ours, strangers were rare. A stranger dressed like that was impossible to ignore. Within minutes, a crowd gathered around him. Adults came out of their houses, children ran from the schoolyard, and old people leaned on their canes to get a better look. I pushed my way into the crowd as far as I could, but I was too short to see much. A tall man stood in front of me, blocking most of my view, and an old grandmother stood behind me, breathing heavily as she tried not to get shoved. The stranger looked over the crowd with a strange, careful gaze. His eyes moved from face to face, as if he was counting us. Then he smiled. It was a clean, bright smile, the kind of smile that should have looked friendly. But even then, something about it bothered me. It was too perfect, too still. "Hello, everyone," he said. His voice was smooth and loud enough for the whole crowd to hear. "My name is Zenka. I have come here to sell Zenka bars made by our company. The price of one Zenka bar is only $5. That was all he said. I remember thinking it was the worst sales pitch I had ever heard, even as a kid. He did not explain what a Zenka bar was. He did not say whether it was candy, bread, chocolate, medicine, or something else. He did not say why anyone should buy it. He only stood there in his purple clothes with that painted smile and waited. I lost interest almost right away. $5 was not much, but I did not want to waste it on some weird purple snack sold by a man who looked like he belonged in a circus. I tried to leave, but the crowd was too thick. People pressed in from every side, and I got trapped between the tall man and the old grandmother. Then the tall man in front of me stepped forward. "I'll try one," he said. He handed Zenka a $5 bill. Zenka took the money with a graceful little bow, then reached into the cart and pulled out a small bar wrapped in purple packaging. The wrapper shone strangely in the sunlight, almost like it was wet. The tall man tore it open right there. Inside was something soft and purple. It did not look like any candy I had ever seen. It looked smooth, almost like it could melt before he even put it in his mouth. The tall man took one bite. The change in his face was instant. His eyes widened, his cheeks lifted. His whole expression filled with a kind of happiness that looked too big for his face. It was not just enjoyment. It was relief, joy, hunger, and madness, all mixed together. He looked like a man who had been thirsty for years and had just tasted water for the first time. "Zenka bars are incredible," he shouted. "This is too delicious. Zenka, quick, give me another one." "No, wait, take all the money I have. Give me as many as this can buy." The crowd reacted as if someone had lit a fire under them. People surged forward, pushing and shouting. Hands reached out with money. Voices begged for a bar. I got shoved so hard that my shoulder hit someone's elbow. The old grandmother behind me almost fell, but no one seemed to care. Everyone wanted one. Zenka kept smiling. By the time I managed to escape the crowd, people were already tearing open purple wrappers all around me. Some ate slowly, with their eyes closed. Others stuffed the bars into their mouths as if afraid someone would steal them. The air filled with the smell of something sweet, thick, and strange. I cannot describe it properly. It was like sugar, flowers, and spoiled fruit at the same time. I went home without buying anything. The next day at school, almost half of my classmates were eating Zenka bars before class even started. Purple wrappers covered their desks. Some students had purple stains around their lips. Even Serena was eating one. That shocked everyone. Serena was always talking about diets. She used to say she would not eat anything until she became thin enough to look like the girls in magazines. But that morning, she was tearing into a Zenka bar like she had not eaten in days. The students who did not have one were staring at the others with jealous eyes. I sat at my desk and tried to ignore the smell. It had followed the bars into the classroom, thick and sweet. Dan sat beside me. His father was Paul, the grocery store owner, and Dan looked annoyed even before he spoke. "Luke," he said, glancing at my empty hands, "how come you're not eating one? Is it because you can't afford it?" That made me angry. "It's only $5, I snapped. Even I can afford that. Why aren't you eating one?" Dan leaned back and crossed his arms. "First, my dad won't let me. He says buying those things helps our competitor, and eating them would be betraying the family. Second, he lowered his voice. It's not $5 anymore." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's $50? $50? I stared at him. "For one bar?" Dan nodded. I thought he was joking. But after school, we went to the town entrance to check for ourselves. We could not even get close to the stand. The crowd was bigger than the day before. People were packed so tightly around the purple cart that it looked like a living wall. Some people were waving money above their heads. Others were shouting Zenka's name. Dan and I stood at a distance and tried to see the price written on the sign hanging from the cart. At first, I thought Dan was right. Then the crowd shifted, and I saw it clearly. It was not $5. It was not $50 either. It was $500. I remember the cold feeling that went through me. $500 for one snack bar made no sense. No one in our town was rich. People argued over grocery prices. They reused old clothes and fixed broken tools instead of buying new ones. Yet they were crowding around that cart like $500 meant nothing. When I got home that evening, 2 Zenka bars were sitting on our kitchen table. I stopped in the doorway. My mother was not in the room, but I could hear her moving somewhere upstairs. The 2 bars lay side by side in their purple wrappers. They looked small and harmless. Still, I did not touch them. I stood there, staring, until my mother called down and told me dinner would be late. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the tall man's face after he took the first bite. I kept thinking about Serena, chewing with purple around her mouth. I kept thinking about the price changing from $5 to $500 in one day. The next morning, my house was quiet. Too quiet. I came downstairs and found the kitchen empty. The 2 Zenka bars were gone. Purple wrappers littered the table and floor. Some were torn into tiny pieces. Others were crumpled like someone had gripped them too hard. The word Zenka was printed across each wrapper in bright white letters. I called for my mother, but she did not answer. I told myself she had gone out early. I told myself everything was fine. But when I stepped outside, the town felt wrong. Doors were open. Curtains moved in windows. Somewhere nearby, someone was laughing in a high, broken voice. Somewhere else, a woman was crying. At school, several classmates were absent. The ones who came looked tired and strange. Many of them were still eating Zenka bars. Serena was at her desk with a pile of wrappers around her. Her mouth was stained completely purple. She was wearing purple clothes, too, the same outfit she had worn the day before. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were wide and wet, but she kept eating, bite after bite. She did not even seem to taste it anymore. She only looked scared whenever the bar got smaller. Dan sat beside me, pale and silent. A few of us who had not eaten the bars looked at each other across the classroom. Nobody said anything, but we all understood that something was very wrong. Then the bell rang. Our teacher came into the room slowly. She looked exhausted. Her shoulders sagged and her steps were unsteady. When she turned toward the class, I saw purple stains around her mouth. My stomach dropped. "Good morning, class," she said in a flat, weak voice. "Class has started. You are not allowed to eat during." Her eyes landed on Serena. The teacher's face twitched. "Yes, Serena," she snapped suddenly, her voice sharp and frantic. "I am talking to you. Do not eat. Stop eating. Stop eating right now. Stop eating." She rushed to Serena's desk and snatched the Zenka bar from her hands. For 1 second, I thought she was going to throw it away. Instead, she took a huge bite. The classroom went silent. The teacher chewed with her eyes half closed. Purple smeared across her teeth. She glared down at Serena with disgust, as if Serena had done something wrong. "You brought this on yourself," the teacher said. "You should have." She never finished. Serena lunged at her. It happened so fast that my mind could not understand it. Serena threw herself across the desk and grabbed the teacher's wrist with both hands. Then she sank her teeth into the Zenka bar still in the teacher's hand. The teacher screamed and tried to pull away, but Serena held on like an animal. The desk tipped over. Books fell. Someone cried out. For a few seconds, I just sat there, frozen. My body would not move. My brain kept telling me I was seeing something impossible. Then Dan grabbed my arm. "Luke," he whispered harshly, "we need to get the school guard." That snapped me out of it. We slipped out of our seats while everyone stared at Serena and the teacher fighting on the floor. Then we ran. The hallway was worse. At first, I thought our class was the only one. Then we passed another classroom and saw students pressed against the windows from inside. Some were eating. Some were fighting. One window had red streaks smeared across the glass. Another classroom door shook as something slammed against it, again and again from the other side. Dan and I ran faster. The school guard's office was near the front entrance. The guard was usually a friendly man who gave candy to little kids and waved at everyone in the morning. When we reached his office, he was sitting stiffly in his chair. His back was straight. His hands rested on his knees. He was staring through the window toward the town entrance. For a moment, I felt relieved. An adult. Someone who could help. Then I noticed he was not blinking. I stepped back. Dan did not see it right away. He called out, "Sir, can you help us?" The guard slowly turned his head. The light from the window fell across his face, and I saw the purple stains around his mouth. But there was red, too. Red on his chin. Red on his shirt. Red under his fingernails. Before he could stand, I grabbed Dan and pulled him away. We ran until we reached a deserted corner behind the school. My chest burned. Dan bent over with his hands on his knees, gasping for air. For a while, neither of us could speak. "Dan," I panted, "what do we do? We have to call the police. Let's go home, get a phone, and call the police." Dan looked at me with fear in his eyes. "Let's go to my grocery store. My dad has a good phone there. It gets a stronger signal." "No," I said quickly. "My phone works too. It's old and kind of broken, but it can call the police." Dan stared at me for a moment. Then he spoke slowly. "Luke, you texted me last night. You said your mom was already eating that garbage." I felt my face go hot. He continued, quieter now. "My parents haven't touched it. My dad hates Zenka. He won't let any of us eat it." I knew he was trying to help. I knew he was scared too, but the words hit me like an insult. "She's going to be fine," I shouted. "She loves me more than anything. I'm going to find her." Before Dan could stop me, I ran. I ran through the streets toward my house. The town looked worse than it had that morning. More doors stood open. Purple wrappers blew across the road like dead leaves. A man sat on his porch with his head in his hands, whispering something over and over. A woman stood in the middle of the street chewing on nothing, her jaw moving even though her hands were empty. From inside one house, I heard a crash, then a scream, then silence. I kept running. When I reached my house, the front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The house was dim, the curtains were closed, and the air smelled sweet and rotten. Purple wrappers covered the floor. Some had red smears on them. I could hear breathing from the living room. "Mom?" I called. At first, nothing moved. Then she stepped out of the shadows. My mother stood in the room with her head slightly tilted. Her mouth was completely purple. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes were full of tears, but her smile looked wrong, stretched too wide and shaking at the corners. "Luke," she said softly, "do you know something?" I could not answer. "Mommy really loves you," she said. "She really, really does." Her voice trembled. For a second, she sounded like herself again, and that made it worse. "But do you know how much a Zanka bar costs now?" she asked. 500 million. 500 million, baby." My legs felt weak. She took one step closer. "Thankfully, mister, Zanka is a kind boss," she whispered. "He said if I catch you and give you to him, I will have an endless supply of Zanka bars forever." Her face twisted with pain. She gripped the side of her head like she was fighting something inside herself. Then her voice changed into a desperate plea. "So please," she said, tears running down her cheeks, run away fast, before Mommy can't control herself anymore." As she said the last words, her body jerked. Her shoulder bent in a way it should not have bent. Her fingers curled like claws. Something cracked inside her arm. Her mouth opened, and a sound came out that was not quite a scream and not quite a laugh. I ran. I burst out of the house and nearly crashed into Dan, who was running toward me. His face was pale, and he was shaking so badly he could barely speak. "Luke," he gasped. "My store, my dad." He stopped. His eyes moved past me. I turned. Zanka stood about 20 meters away from my house, pulling his purple cart behind him. He looked exactly the same as he had on the first day. Same purple top hat, same purple coat, same curled mustache, same perfect smile. The streets around him were empty, but I could feel people watching from windows and doorways. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. "Luke and Dan," Zenka said calmly, "I suggest you two come over here quietly." His voice was gentle, almost kind. "You have no way to contact the outside world," he continued. "And do you really think you can run out of these mountains on foot? Do everyone a favor. Save some time. Just come over." Behind me, the front door of my house flew open so hard it hit the wall. I did not look back. I grabbed Dan's hand and ran to my family's motorcycle. My hands were shaking as I shoved the key into the ignition. Dan climbed on behind me, nearly falling off in his panic. I held the brake and pressed the starter button. For one awful second, the engine coughed and did not start. Behind us, I heard my mother moving. "Fast, Luke," Dan cried. I pressed the starter again. The engine roared to life. Just before the thing that used to be my mother could reach us, I twisted the throttle as far as it would go. The motorcycle shot forward. Dan clung to me, screaming. We sped straight toward the town entrance, straight toward Zenka and his cart. Zenka did not move at first. He only smiled wider. At the last second, I swerved hard. The motorcycle scraped against the side of the purple cart. Something tore. A shower of Zenka bars spilled out behind us, their wrappers flashing purple in the air. From the houses, people screamed and rushed into the street. I did not stop. We reached the narrow mountain path and flew down it faster than I had ever ridden in my life. The path twisted sharply, with rocks on one side and a drop on the other. Dan shouted at me to slow down, but I could not. Behind us, I heard voices echoing from the valley. Hungry voices. Angry voices. My mother's voice was somewhere among them, calling my name. The motorcycle slipped twice on loose gravel. Each time, I thought we were dead. But somehow, I kept it steady. We rode until the town disappeared behind the trees and the mountain walls closed around us. Only when we reached the parking lot outside the valley did I stop. Dan and I both fell off the motorcycle more than climbed down. My hands were numb. My throat hurt from breathing too hard. Dan found a phone first. His fingers shook so badly he almost dropped it, but he managed to call the police. We told them everything. Or at least we tried to. Two 10-year-old boys talking about a purple man, candy bars, blood, and a town going mad did not sound believable. But maybe they heard the fear in our voices. Maybe they had received other strange calls before the phone lines went silent. Whatever the reason, they came. When the police reached the town, it was empty. No people. No Zenka. No cart. No Zenka bars either. Not one wrapper was left, not even a torn corner of that shiny purple packaging. It was as if someone had carefully removed every trace of the thing that had started it all. But they could not remove the blood. It was everywhere. On the ground, on walls, across doors and windows, in the school hallways, in Paul's grocery store, on the grass, on the flowers, even on the rocks near the town entrance. The police searched for days, but they found no survivors. They found no bodies either, not whole ones. What they did find was never explained to us, and I am glad no one tried. After that, the town was sealed off forever. Officially, they said there had been a chemical accident. Then later, they changed it to a landslide risk. The story changed depending on who was telling it. But the result was always the same. No one was allowed back in. Dan and I were sent to different orphanages. We were both children with no families left, and the world outside the mountains did not know what to do with us. For a while, we called each other every week. Then, every month. Then only on birthdays and holidays. Life pulled us in different directions, but we never truly lost touch. How could we? We were the only two people who knew the truth. Years passed. I grew up. I moved to a city. I learned how to act normal. I learned how to smile when people talked about childhood memories. I learned how not to flinch whenever I saw purple candy wrappers in a store. I learned how to tell myself that Zenka was gone, but I never forgot his smile. Today, Dan called me. I knew something was wrong before he said a word. His breathing sounded the same as it had that day behind the school, quick and broken. "Luke," he said, his voice trembling. "My city." He stopped. "What is it?" I asked. There was a long silence. Then Dan whispered, "They're building a Zenka bars factory in my city." I did not answer right away. I could not. Because through the phone, behind Dan's shaking breath, I heard something else. A crowd. People cheering. And somewhere far away, faint but clear, the smooth voice of a man in a purple coat welcoming everyone to the future of Zenka. Story 2. I woke up with a headache so bad it felt like someone had split my skull open while I was sleeping. For a few seconds, I did not even know where I was. My room was blurry, my mouth was dry, and my whole body felt heavy, like I had been buried under wet sand. I tried to open my eyes, but even the small strip of morning light coming through the curtains felt painful. It was not just bright. It felt sharp. It felt loud. Somehow the light pressed against my eyes and made the pain in my head throb harder. I turned my face into the pillow and groaned, hoping the darkness would swallow me again. My alarm was still buzzing on the nightstand. The sound drilled into my skull. I slapped around blindly until my fingers found my phone. I missed the button twice before I finally shut it off. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was thick and strange, and under it, I could hear my own heartbeat thudding inside my ears. Each beat made my headache pulse. I lay there for a long moment, trying to decide if I could force myself to get up and go to work. The answer came quickly. There was no way. My stomach rolled, my hands felt weak, and even breathing seemed like too much work. I called in sick with my eyes still half closed. I do not remember exactly what I said. My voice sounded cracked and far away, like it belonged to someone else. I think I told my manager I had a fever, or maybe a migraine, maybe both. She sounded annoyed, but I barely cared. As soon as the call ended, I dropped the phone beside me and pulled the blanket over my face. The smell under the blanket was warm and stale, but it felt better than the light. I told myself I just needed a few more hours of sleep. I told myself I would wake up feeling normal again. When I opened my eyes the next time, the room was dark. For a moment, I thought I had only slept a little while, but then I noticed the window. The curtains were black against the glass. The weak yellow light from the street lamp outside made thin lines across the ceiling. Night had come. I had lost the whole day. My head still hurt, but now the pain had changed. It was deeper, heavier, like something was pushing from the inside of my skull. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. My throat felt rough, like I had swallowed dust. I tried to sit up, and my stomach cramped so hard I doubled over with a gasp. Then I heard the sound. A sharp metallic screech came from the corner of the room. I flinched and looked toward it. Pebbles, my hamster, was running on her wheel inside her cage. Round and round, fast as ever. The wheel squealed with every turn, a thin, rusty cry that made my teeth ache. I had been meaning to oil it for weeks. Every night I told myself I would buy some WD-40. Every morning I forgot. Pebbles never seemed to care. She ran like she was trying to escape something, tiny paws moving so fast they blurred in the dim light. Usually that sound annoyed me. That night, it felt different. It felt too clear. I could hear every tiny scrape of her claws on the metal. I could hear the soft push of bedding under her feet when she slowed for half a second. I could even hear her breathing, quick and small, under the shriek of the wheel. I sat there in bed, staring at the cage, wondering why everything sounded so close. My throat burned. I reached for the glass of water on my nightstand. It had been sitting there for at least 2 days, maybe longer. Dust floated on the surface, and the water tasted flat and old, but I drank what was left in 2 desperate gulps. It did almost nothing. My mouth still felt dry. My lips felt cracked. I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to wake myself fully, and that was when another cramp twisted through my stomach. It was not normal hunger. I had skipped meals before. I knew what hunger felt like. This was different. This was a deep, sick emptiness that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It clawed under my ribs. It pulled at my spine. It made my hands shake. My body did not just want food. It needed food. Right now. Anything, I stood up too fast and nearly fell. The room swayed around me. My feet were cold against the floor, and sweat clung to my back even though the air in the room was chilly. Pebbles kept running, the wheel screaming behind me as I stumbled to the door. I did not turn on the hallway light. I did not need to. I could see well enough in the dark, better than I should have been able to. Every shape in the hallway seemed outlined in gray. The framed pictures on the wall, the laundry basket near the stairs, the little scratch in the paint by the bathroom door. I noticed all of it. Downstairs, the house smelled wrong. At first, I thought it was trash. Something old in the bin, maybe, but the smell was thicker than that. Sweet, damp, earthy, it seemed to reach into the back of my throat. My stomach cramped again, but this time it was not only pain. Something inside me answered the smell, my mouth filled with saliva. I went into the kitchen and opened the fridge. The light hit my eyes like a slap. I hissed and turned my head away, blinking hard. The headache flared, and for a moment I had to grip the fridge door to stay upright. When my eyes adjusted, I looked inside. There was not much there. Half a bottle of milk, a jar of pickles, some takeout boxes I did not trust, a soft tomato sitting in the drawer, a few slices of cheese curled at the edges. Then I saw the package at the back. Ground beef. I had bought it weeks ago with the idea that I would make burgers. Then I forgot about it. It had slid behind a carton of eggs and stayed there. Waiting, the plastic wrap sagged inward. A little cloudy liquid had gathered at the bottom of the tray. The meat itself was no longer red. It had turned gray and brown, with soft blue-green patches blooming across the surface. It looked ruined. It looked poisonous. It looked like something that should have gone straight into the garbage. I reached for it anyway. The package was cold and wet in my hands. The plastic made a soft, sucking sound as I peeled it back. The smell came out all at once, strong enough to make my eyes water. It should have made me gag. Part of me knew that. It was rotten meat. It was spoiled, old, and dangerous. It smelled like damp soil, old blood, and something sweet that had been left too long in the heat. But my stomach tightened with need. I stood there in the yellow fridge light, breathing it in. My hands shook harder. A small, scared voice in the back of my mind told me to stop. It told me to throw it away, close the fridge, drink some water, call a doctor, do anything except what I was about to do. I knew I should cook it. At the very least, I should have put it in a pan and burned it until it was safe. I knew that. I really did. But knowing did not matter. I pinched a piece between my fingers. It did not hold together. The meat collapsed into a wet, sticky pulp. It smeared over my fingertips. I brought it to my mouth slowly, still expecting my body to reject it, still hoping I would come to my senses before it touched my tongue. Then I ate it. The taste spread through my mouth, thick and warm even though the meat was cold. It was soft and gluey, almost like paste. It coated my tongue and slid down my throat in a heavy lump. I shuddered so hard my shoulder hit the fridge. Not from disgust, from pleasure. A deep, horrible pleasure that rolled through me like heat. I swallowed and immediately grabbed another handful. It was incredible. That was the first thought that came to me. Not fear, not shame, just surprise. How had I lived my whole life without knowing this? How had I cooked meat, seasoned it, burned it, covered it in sauces, when it could taste like this? Raw and wet and rich, with that sweet, rotten edge that made my whole body hum. I ate faster. The meat broke apart between my fingers and slid under my nails. I licked my palms. I scraped the tray. I sucked the gray liquid from the corner of the plastic like it was broth. Somewhere in the middle of it, a thought rose through the hunger. Why is my neck wet? I froze with a mouthful of meat halfway down my throat. Something warm was sliding along the left side of my neck, slow and steady. At first, I thought it was sweat. I wiped it with the back of my hand and looked down. Blood streaked my skin. Not just blood. There was something thicker mixed with it. Pale yellow, almost white. It clung to my fingers in strings. The smell hit me a second later, sharp and rotten. Worse than the meat, worse than the fridge, worse than anything I had ever smelled. My hunger pulled back for one clear second, and fear rushed in to fill the space. I dropped the empty meat tray. It slapped against the kitchen floor. I ran to the bathroom so fast I hit my shoulder on the doorframe. My bare feet slipped on the tile, and I grabbed the sink with both hands. The room was dark except for the weak night light plugged into the wall, but I could see myself in the mirror. I almost did not recognize my face. My skin looked gray. My eyes were sunken and shiny. My lips were smeared with old meat and dark juice, and from my left ear, a thick trail of blood and pus was running down my jaw, over my neck, and into the collar of my shirt. For a few seconds, I just stared. Then I leaned closer. My ear did not look right. The opening seemed wider somehow, dark and wet around the edges. I grabbed a towel and wiped the side of my face. More fluid came out. Fresh blood followed it. My hands began to shake so badly I could barely hold the towel. I turned my head toward the mirror and tried to see inside the ear. It was useless. The nightlight was too dim. I grabbed my phone from the bathroom counter. I must have brought it with me without realizing it. The screen was smeared from my fingers. I turned on the flashlight and raised it to the side of my head. The white beam stabbed my eye, and the headache exploded. Still, I looked. My eardrum was gone. There should have been something there. A barrier. A thin wall. I knew that much, even if I was not a doctor. But there was nothing. Just an opening, dark and slick, leading deeper into my head than it should have. It was like looking into a tunnel that did not belong in a human body. It disappeared inward, wet and red, going deep, deep, deep into my skull. I could still hear. That made it worse. I could hear the drip of blood landing in the sink. I could hear the fridge humming downstairs. I could hear pebbles running on her wheel above me, the faint metal squeal traveling through the walls. I could hear too much. A wave of bile rose in my throat. "What the hell?" I whispered. The words sounded strange, like they came from inside the tunnel instead of my mouth. Then pain shot through my left eye. It was sudden and bright, like a hot wire had been pushed through my skull from ear to eye. My knees buckled. The phone fell from my hand and clattered across the tile. The flashlight beam spun around the room, flashing over the sink, the toilet, the ceiling, my own face in the mirror. I tried to catch myself, but my hands would not work. The floor rushed up. Everything went black. When I came back, the first thing I noticed was the cold tile against my cheek. It felt wonderful. My skin was damp with sweat and blood, and the floor pulled the heat out of me. For a little while, I did not move. I listened to the house. The fridge, the pipes, the soft ticking of the bathroom fan, even though it was turned off. Pebbles, still running, always running. I blinked and lifted my head. The phone lay near the bathtub, its flashlight still on. The beam pointed at the wall. I looked around in confusion. Why was I on the bathroom floor? Why did my mouth taste like spoiled meat? Why was my shirt wet? Then the memory returned. The headache, the fridge, the rotten beef, the blood from my ear, the tunnel. My hand flew up to the left side of my head. My fingers touched wet skin, and I nearly screamed. The fear came back, bigger this time, filling my chest until I could barely breathe. I needed to see it again. I needed to know I had imagined it. Maybe the pain had made me hallucinate. Maybe the light and the blood and the hole in my ear had all been part of some fever dream. I crawled to the sink and pulled myself up. My legs felt weak and loose. The mirror above the sink showed only the outside of my ear, and that was not enough. I started opening drawers and cabinets, throwing things onto the floor. Toothpaste, razors, cotton swabs, old medicine bottles, a box of bandages. My hands moved wildly, knocking everything aside until I found a small hand mirror behind a stack of towels. I did not want to look. Of course I looked. I held my phone in one hand and the mirror in the other. It took several tries to get the angle right. The flashlight beam kept shaking. My breath came fast and loud. Finally, the reflection lined up. I saw inside. The tunnel was real. It ran inches deep, maybe deeper. The walls were swollen and raw, shining with blood and pus. The opening seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. At the far end, in the deepest part I could see, something moved. I stopped breathing. It was small, but not small enough. Pale and fleshy, almost white. Its body was soft and segmented, slick with fluid. When the light touched it, it twisted away. It did not have eyes, not that I could see, but somehow it knew the light was there. It writhed and pushed itself deeper into the tunnel, burrowing into me like my skull was soil, a larva. The word came into my mind so clearly that for a second I thought someone had said it out loud. I dropped the hand mirror. It cracked against the sink and fell into the basin. I backed away until I hit the wall. My knees gave out again, but this time I stayed awake. I slid down to the floor with both hands pressed over my ears, even though one of them was not really an ear anymore. I wanted to cry. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to tear the whole side of my head open and pull the thing out. But under the panic, there was something else, a quiet feeling. Not calm exactly. Not at first. More like a numbness spreading through the fear. The longer I sat there, the less urgent it seemed. Yes, there was something inside my head. Yes, it was alive. Yes, it had eaten through my eardrum, or crawled through it, or made a home where no living thing should ever be. But the terror began to soften at the edges. My stomach cramped again. I pressed a hand against it and bent forward. The hunger had returned, stronger than before. The rotten beef had not been enough. It had only woken something up. I thought about the empty tray on the kitchen floor and felt a deep sadness that there was none left. My mouth watered again. Outside the bathroom window, the sky was no longer black. A pale yellow light was spreading over the edge of the world. Morning was coming. I had been on the floor for hours, or maybe I had only thought I had. Time felt loose now. The house was quiet, except for Pebbles and her wheel. I knew what I should do. I should call an ambulance. I should call anyone. A doctor, a neighbor, my manager, my mother. I should explain that something was wrong with me, that something had crawled inside my head, that I had eaten rotten meat and liked it, that blood and pus were pouring from my ear. I should wrap a towel around my head and get help before the thing went any deeper. I even thought about the tweezers in the drawer. I could take them, hold the flashlight steady, and reach in. Maybe I could grab it. Maybe I could pull it out myself. It would hurt, but pain was better than letting it stay. Pain was better than letting it dig farther into my skull. But the thought faded before I moved, because the truth was, I did not want to anymore. I cannot explain when that changed. At first, the sight of it had filled me with horror. At first, I had been sure I would do anything to get it out. But sitting there on the cold bathroom floor, listening to the morning grow around me, the idea began to feel almost cruel. It was alive. It was scared of the light. It had hidden deeper when I looked at it. It had not asked to be born wherever it was born. It had found warmth. It had found shelter. Everyone had to live somewhere, did they not? The thought felt strange, but also gentle. It settled over me like a blanket. Maybe that was the fever talking. Maybe the thing in my head was doing something to me. Maybe it had already touched some part of my brain that made fear smaller and hunger bigger. I knew those were possible explanations. I understood that something was terribly wrong. But knowing did not matter anymore. Only one thing mattered. I was hungry. God, I was so hungry. The hunger was not just in my stomach now. It was in my teeth. It was in my hands. It was in the hollow spaces of my bones. It made the bathroom smell different. The blood on my neck smelled warm and interesting. The cracked skin around my fingernails smelled salty. The old towel on the floor smelled of mildew and dust. I could smell the kitchen downstairs. I could smell the trash. I could smell the empty meat tray. I could smell life moving in the walls, tiny scratches and soft bodies hidden behind plaster. And then, through the wall, I heard pebbles. The wheel squealed again and again, steady and sharp. Her paws tapped against the metal. Her tiny body breathed fast. She ran in circles, never knowing that I could hear every little sound she made. Never knowing that I was sitting on the bathroom floor with blood drying on my neck and something pale moving deep inside my skull. I slowly turned my head toward the sound. The movement sent a soft pressure through my left ear, like something inside had shifted with me. For a moment, I almost smiled. Pebbles kept running. The wheel screamed. My stomach tightened. Maybe I should go check on her. Story 3, I woke up with the kind of headache that makes the whole world feel wrong. It was not just pain, it was pressure, heavy and deep, like someone had pushed both hands inside my skull and was trying to pull it apart from the inside. For a few seconds, I did not even know where I was. My bedroom was blurry around me, all gray shadows and sharp little flashes of light sneaking through the curtains. I tried to open my eyes all the way, but the thin daylight felt too strong. Somehow, even the light seemed loud. I rolled onto my side and pressed the heel of my hand against my forehead. My skin was hot, but the room felt cold. My mouth tasted old and dry, like I had been sleeping with dust on my tongue. Somewhere near my bed, my phone buzzed. The sound went straight through my skull and made my stomach twist. I reached for it without looking and nearly knocked over the glass of water on my nightstand. Work, I was already late. I stared at the screen, squinting against the brightness, and typed the shortest message I could manage. I told my manager I was sick, that I had a bad headache, and that I would not be coming in. I did not wait for a reply. I dropped the phone face down on the blanket, pulled the covers over my head, and let myself fall back into sleep. The next time I opened my eyes, the room was dark. For a moment, I thought I had only slept for an hour or two, but the color of the room told me different. The pale morning light was gone. The walls were black shapes. The window was a dark square. Night had come while I was sleeping, and I had no memory of the day passing at all. Then I heard the sound. A sharp metallic screech came from the corner of the room. I flinched so hard my neck cracked. The sound came again and again, fast and steady, scraping through the silence like a tiny knife being dragged across metal. It was Pebbles. My hamster was running on her wheel like she was trying to escape the cage. Her little body was nothing more than a soft blur in the shadows. The wheel spun under her paws, squeaking and grinding with every turn. She did this sometimes at night, but it had never sounded this bad before. Every screech stabbed into my head. I made a weak note to myself to buy WD-40 in the morning, then slowly sat up. The room tilted. My stomach rolled. My head still hurt, but now there was something worse underneath it. A hollow, painful pulling in my belly. It felt like my insides were folding in on themselves. I was hungry. No, hungry was not the right word. I was starving. It felt like I had not eaten in days. My throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. I grabbed the glass from the nightstand and drank whatever was left in it. The water was warm and stale, with little bits of dust floating near the bottom, but I gulped it down anyway. It barely helped. My tongue still felt thick. My mouth still felt empty. The pain in my stomach got sharper. I stood up too fast and had to catch myself on the edge of the bed. My legs were weak, and sweat had dried sticky on my back. I could smell myself, sour and feverish. I'd slept in the same t-shirt all day, maybe longer. I could not remember the last proper meal I had eaten. I could barely remember yesterday. Pebble's wheel kept screaming behind me. I shuffled out of the bedroom and down the hallway. The house was silent except for that wheel and the soft thud of my own steps. Everything looked strange in the dark, even the things I saw every day. The framed picture near the stairs looked like a face. The coat hanging by the door looked like a person standing still. I knew it was only my headache and the dark playing tricks on me, but I still kept glancing over my shoulder. By the time I reached the kitchen, the cramps in my stomach had become almost unbearable. They squeezed and twisted until I had to lean against the counter and breathe through my teeth. My body wanted food. It did not care what kind. It just wanted something. I opened the fridge. The light inside hit my eyes like a flash. I hissed and turned my head away, blinking hard. Even with my eyes half closed, the bright white glow felt painful. It made the edges of everything shimmer. Milk carton, old takeout box, mustard, a few eggs, a bruised apple. Nothing looked good. Nothing looked like enough. Then I saw the package at the back. It was ground beef, or at least it used to be. I had bought it weeks ago, maybe longer. I remembered putting it there after work one night, planning to make burgers, then forgetting about it completely. It had slipped behind a jar of pickles and stayed there, hidden and slowly changing. I pulled it out. The plastic was loose and swollen in places. Inside, the meat had turned a dull gray color, wet and soft. Blue-green patches of mold dotted the surface like tiny islands. A thin brown liquid had gathered at the bottom of the tray. Any normal person would have thrown it away without even thinking. I knew that. I really did. But I did not throw it away. I stood there in the cold light of the fridge, holding the package with both hands, staring at it while saliva filled my mouth. The smell was already leaking out through the plastic. It was earthy and sweet and rotten like wet soil, spoiled fruit, and something dead under leaves. My stomach answered with another painful twist, but this time the pain felt almost excited. My hands shook as I peeled back the plastic. The smell hit me all at once. Thick, warm, alive. It should have made me gag. It should have sent me running to the trash can. Instead, my knees almost weakened with need. The meat had turned into a soft, gluey mess. When I touched it, it broke apart between my fingers. It was cold from the fridge, but it seemed to pulse against my skin. I knew I should cook it. I knew I should get a pan, turn on the stove, burn away whatever sickness was growing in it. But the thought of waiting even 5 minutes made something inside me snap. I lifted a handful to my mouth. The first bite was wet and sour. The texture was awful, like paste and slime mixed together, but the taste flooded through me with a pleasure so strong it made my eyes roll back. I chewed and swallowed before I could think. The rotten meat slid down my throat in heavy clumps, coating my tongue, sticking to the roof of my mouth, filling every empty place inside me. I made a small sound. I could not stop it. It was disgusting. It was perfect. I ate another handful, then another. The cold grease smeared across my lips, bits of gray meat stuck under my nails. The smell covered my face and hands, but I did not care. My whole body trembled with relief. Every bite made the cramps fade for a second, then come back stronger. I felt like I had discovered something I had been missing my whole life. How had I never known food could taste like this? How had I wasted so many years cooking things, cleaning them, covering them with salt and sauce and heat? This was better. This was real. This was what my body wanted. Then, something warm slid down the side of my neck. I froze with my fingers still in my mouth. At first I thought it was grease from the meat. I lowered my hand and touched the side of my face. My fingertips came away wet. In the dim kitchen light, the liquid looked dark, almost black. I wiped again, slower this time. Blood, not just blood. There was something thicker mixed in with it, something yellow-white and sticky. The smell of it cut through the rotten beef. It was sharper, uglier, like old infection and spoiled milk. The pleasure vanished. I dropped the package of meat. It hit the floor with a wet slap. My hand flew to the left side of my head, and my fingers pressed against my ear. More liquid spilled over them. Warm, thick, wrong. My heart began to hammer. I ran to the bathroom, stumbling once in the hallway and hitting my shoulder against the wall. The house seemed too narrow around me. The dark stretched at the corners of my vision. Pebble's wheels screeched from the bedroom, faster now, or maybe I was only hearing it that way because I was scared. I slammed my hand against the bathroom switch. The light came on, and pain burst behind my eyes. I leaned over the sink and forced myself to look in the mirror. At first, my reflection looked normal enough to make me hope. Pale face, messy hair. Meat smeared around my mouth like a child's messy dinner. Eyes too wide, skin too shiny with sweat. Then I turned my head. The left side of my neck was streaked with blood and pus. It had soaked the collar of my shirt. It was still coming, slow and steady, draining from inside my ear. I leaned closer. My ear canal was not right. I do not know what I expected to see. Maybe a cut, maybe a swollen infection, maybe blood from scratching in my sleep. But there was no eardrum. There was no normal end to the ear at all. It was open, a dark, wet tunnel going far deeper than it should have been able to go. I gripped the edge of the sink so hard my fingers hurt. I could still hear. That was the worst part. I could hear better than before. I could hear the buzz of the bathroom light above me. I could hear water ticking somewhere inside the pipes. I could hear pebbles running in the other room, each tiny footstep on the wheel, each little breath from her small body. I could even hear my own blood moving. My stomach lifted, and bile burned the back of my throat. I wanted to scream, but my voice got trapped behind my teeth. Instead, I grabbed my phone from my pocket and turned on the flashlight. The beam was too bright. It made the mirror flare white, and for a second, I saw nothing. Then I angled it toward the side of my head. The light entered my ear. The tunnel went deep, too deep. It disappeared into my skull, slick and red along the sides, shining with fluid. It looked impossible, like someone had drilled a hole through bone and meat while I slept. The inside seemed to move, but maybe it was only the light shaking in my hand. Then, pain exploded behind my left eye. It was sudden and white-hot, like a wire had been pushed through my ear and stabbed straight into the front of my skull. My knees buckled. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered into the sink. The mirror, the light, the blood, all of it spun together. I hit the floor hard. For a while, there was nothing. When I opened my eyes again, my cheek was pressed against the bathroom tile. It was cold, and for one strange second, that was the only thing I cared about. The cold felt good against my damp skin. I lay there breathing softly, confused by the taste of rot in my mouth and the ache in my body. Why was I on the bathroom floor? I blinked at the base of the toilet, at a dark smear of blood near the sink, at my phone lying in the basin with its flashlight still on, shining up at the ceiling. Then the memory came back. The meat, the blood, my ear, I sat up so quickly the room swayed. My hand shot to the side of my head. The skin around my ear was tender and wet. The hole was still there. The drainage had slowed, but it had not stopped. No, 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 no. I needed to see it again. I did not want to, but I needed to know. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the headache had made me see things. Maybe I had passed out and dreamed the worst part. I tore through the bathroom cabinets, knocking bottles and boxes into the sink. Painkillers, cotton balls, old razors, a comb, a thermometer. Finally, behind a half-empty bottle of lotion, I found a small hand mirror with a cracked handle. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I stood between the sink mirror and the hand mirror, turning my head, trying to catch the right angle. It took a few tries. The reflection jumped and blurred. Then, the bathroom light hit the inside of my ear. Clearly. I looked. I wish I had not. The opening was wider than before, or maybe I could just see it better now. The tunnel ran inches deep into my head. The walls were raw and wet, lined with torn tissue and dark veins. It should have been impossible for that much space to exist inside me. There should have been bone. There should have been something solid stopping it. But there was only depth. Deep inside, near the place where the light became weak, something moved. I stopped breathing. It was pale, almost white, smooth and soft and fleshy. Its body curled against itself, then stretched, then pulled away from the light. It moved like a maggot, but bigger, thicker, more alive than anything that should have been inside a human head. A larva. The word came into my mind, simple and clear. It twisted deeper when the light touched it. It pushed itself into the darkness, burying its body farther into me, and as it moved, I felt a slow pressure behind my eye. Not pain this time, more like a finger gently pressing from the inside. I dropped the mirror. It shattered in the sink. For a while, I just stood there, staring at my own reflection with my mouth open. I wanted to call an ambulance. I wanted to run outside and bang on a neighbor's door. I wanted to dig the thing out with tweezers, with a knife, with anything. My mind showed me quick pictures of doctors holding me down, bright hospital lights, metal tools going into my ear, someone saying words like infection and parasite and emergency surgery. But then another thought came. Quiet at first. Why? I pressed both hands to the sink and waited for panic to come back. It did not. Not the way it should have. My heart was still beating fast, but the fear had started to soften around the edges. It felt far away, like something I had watched happen to another person. There was a living thing inside my head. Yes, that was bad. Wasn't it? I tried to hold on to the horror of it. I tried to remember how wrong it had looked, how deep it had gone, how the thing had moved away from the light. But each time I reached for fear, my mind slipped somewhere else. I thought about pebbles in her cage. I thought about how she burrowed into bedding when she wanted to sleep. I thought about how all small creatures needed safe, dark places. Everyone had to live somewhere. The thought made me smile a little, and that scared me more than the larva had. I stepped back from the sink. My reflection moved with me. My face looked calmer now, too calm. Blood had dried in a line down my neck. Rotten meat was still smeared at the corner of my mouth. My eyes looked bright, almost feverish, but I did not feel sick anymore. I felt empty. The hunger had returned. It came slowly at first, like a hand closing around my stomach. Then it grew. It spread through my chest and throat. It filled my mouth with saliva again. The package of spoiled beef was still on the kitchen floor. I could smell it from here, even through the walls, even under the bathroom cleaner and old soap and my own blood. The smell called to me, but there was another smell too. Faint, warm, musky, alive from the bedroom, Pebbles' wheel kept turning. Screech, 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 the sound no longer hurt my head. It was clear now, beautifully clear. I could hear every spin of the wheel, every tiny scrape of metal, every quick little breath. I could hear her claws. I could hear her heart. Or at least I thought I could. A soft, fast fluttering hidden under the noise. I stood very still and listened. The sky outside the bathroom window had begun to change. Night was thinning. A pale yellow light pressed against the glass. Morning was coming. I had been awake for hours, maybe longer. I should have been exhausted, but I was not. My body felt weak in some places and powerful in others. My hands twitched at my sides. My teeth ached. I told myself again that I should call for help. I even picked up my phone. The screen was cracked from the fall, but it still worked. Emergency services were 3 numbers away. I stared at the keypad. My thumb hovered over it. Then the pressure behind my eye returned. Not painful, not really, more like a gentle reminder. My thumb lowered. I locked the phone and set it on the sink. I could still get help later. There was no rush. The thing inside me was not hurting anyone. It had been scared of the light, that was all. It had hidden deeper because I had frightened it. Maybe it was as confused as I was. Maybe it had woken up hungry, too. My stomach growled so loudly it echoed in the bathroom. I laughed once, under my breath. The sound did not feel like mine. I rinsed my hands in the sink, but the water did not take away the smell. Rotten beef clung under my nails. Blood stuck in the lines of my fingers. I watched pink water circle the drain and felt nothing. No disgust, no panic, just hunger. God, I was hungry. The wheel screamed again from the bedroom. I turned my head toward the sound. Through the wall, through the wood and plaster, through the dark hallway, I could hear Pebbles running and running. Poor thing. She had been making that noise all night. Maybe she was restless. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she knew something had changed in the house before I did. I stepped out of the bathroom. The hallway was dim and quiet. The kitchen waited at one end, with the spoiled meat cooling on the floor. My bedroom waited at the other, where Pebbles ran in her little cage, trapped behind thin bars, warm and soft and alive. I told myself I was only going to check on her. Just check on her. That was all. But as I walked toward the bedroom, my mouth filled with saliva again, and deep inside my skull, something pale and hidden shifted with joy. Story 4. It was not only that she had died. That alone would have been enough to break me. It was what had happened to her body. She had started to decay. I woke up beside her and saw the face I had loved for years changed into something swollen, gray, and empty. Her beautiful face was marked by round, ugly bumps. Her eyes stared at nothing. I had woken up to that face so many times before, warm and soft in the morning light, and now I could not bear the thought of never waking up to it again. When I moved her, the pillow beneath her head had a dark stain on it. There was a strange residue left behind, something wet and dirty. I did not care. I pulled her into my arms and held her close. Her skin was cold against my chest. She was heavier than I remembered. So heavy. I thought I could carry her weight forever if I had to, but I could not carry the pain that came with it. I could not carry this grief. It felt like something huge was sitting inside my chest, crushing me from the inside. There was a dark layer on her face, almost like soot. It covered parts of her cheeks and forehead. When my tears fell onto her skin, they washed little trails through it, like thin rivers cutting through a burnt field. I wanted to believe that underneath it, her skin would still glow the way it always had. But it did not. It was just as dull and discolored as the rest of her. It was the middle of the night. I had laid her back down on the bed. I tucked the blanket around her like I had done on cold mornings when she slept in longer than me. From far enough away, she almost looked like she was only sleeping. If I stood in the doorway and did not look too closely, I could almost pretend she would open her eyes at any moment and ask why I was standing there staring. I tried to remember what had happened the night before, but everything came back in pieces. I came home from work. She had made dinner. She always did, even when she had worked a long day herself. She had set the table and waited for me so we could eat together. Before I sat down, I had a few drinks. Maybe more than a few. Then we ate and talked about our day. We had not been fighting as much lately. At the time, I could not tell if she had finally given up on trying to argue with me, or if she had started to understand my side and wanted things to get better. Back then, I did not care which one it was. The house had finally been quiet. Peaceful, that was enough for me. Now, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her body in the bed. I did not know what to do. I had been crying for what felt like hours. I had been staring at her for even longer, pretending she was asleep. Her hair still had its color. That soft blonde shine was still there. In the sun, it used to glow like gold. I used to see it across the pillow in the morning and think there was nothing more beautiful in the world. I thought I could leave her there until morning. I could let her rest. No one would know I had woken up in the night. No one would know I had found her like this. I could stay with her and watch the sun rise on her hair one last time. I could see it shine again before everything changed forever. Then I looked at the clock on her nightstand. It said 64 am. The numbers were wrong. They did not make sense. The clock was not moving. I stared at it for a long time, trying to understand what I was seeing. I knew I was not dreaming. I had already hit my head against the wall to prove it. I had punched the bed frame while holding her, and the wood had cracked under my hand. My knuckles were swollen and throbbing. This was a nightmare, but it was not a dream. The shadows in the house were wrong, too. They moved in ways shadows should not move. Downstairs, light usually came through the front windows from the street lamps outside. But now there was no light there. It was black, like someone had pressed a wall of darkness against the glass. From somewhere inside that darkness came a low humming sound. I looked back at my wife. Could I leave her there alone? Was her soul still near the bed? Was she watching me? I hoped she could not see how much pain I was in. Then I thought maybe I wanted her to see it. Maybe then she would know for sure how much I loved her. Maybe she would finally understand. I whispered it again and again in my head. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I had not said it enough when she was alive. I knew I had to go downstairs. Something was wrong with the house. When I reached the main floor, I realized there was still light outside. The windows were not black because the world outside had disappeared. They were black because something had coated the glass. The same dark substance that had been on her face was smeared over everything. It looked like ash or charcoal dust. It covered the walls, the windows, the floor, and the furniture. When I touched it, it came off on my fingers like burnt powder. The clock in the kitchen said 0036 am. That made no sense either. Then I saw the symbols on the walls. They had been drawn in the ash, large circles. Around the edge of each circle were strange letters I did not recognize. Inside the circles were wings and 3 crosses. It looked as if someone had dragged their fingers through the black dust to make them. They were everywhere I looked. "Hello?" I called. No one answered. I stood there in the dark, breathing hard, trying to make sense of it. Had there been a fire? An electrical problem? Had something burned in the walls while we slept? Was that how she had died? I flipped a light switch, but nothing happened. The lights stayed off. Still, the clocks were working. Or at least they were showing numbers. Why did the clocks work when nothing else did? Why did they all say different things? Why were some of them not even real times? I thought about the breaker in the basement. Maybe the power had gone out. Maybe I just needed to check it. But the humming sound was coming from the basement door. It grew louder the closer I got to it. The sound was deep and steady, like something alive breathing through the walls. Could she have been burned? Could she have been shocked? Was there some kind of gas leak? My mind kept reaching for normal answers, because the truth was too much to hold. As I passed the bathroom, I saw the light was on inside. It hurt my eyes after all the darkness. A towel lay on the floor near the sink. I did not remember leaving it there the night before. I stopped and stared at it. Then another piece of memory returned. She had wanted me. For the first time in a long time, she had wanted to be close to me. She had reached for me in bed, but I could not. Again, I could not. I had watched too many things. I had filled my mind with too many images. I could not feel what I was supposed to feel with my own wife. And still, after she had fallen asleep, I had gone to the bathroom alone. The basement doorknob began to rattle. The door shook in its frame. The humming grew louder behind it. Suddenly, I wished I could run back upstairs and wake her up. I wished she could come down with me and stand beside me. I was scared. I could not do this alone. So I went back upstairs to check on her. She was gone. The bed was empty. I ripped the blanket away and searched under the covers as if she could somehow be hiding there. There was nothing but the dark outline of her body left in ash on the sheet. It marked the place where she had been lying. For one wild second, I thought she might be alive. She had to be alive. She had gotten up. She had walked away. But I had held her. I had felt how cold she was. Then I saw the empty bottles of vodka on the floor beside the bed. They had not been there before. I knew they had not been there. My stomach tightened. Where was she? On the stairs leading down to the main floor, there were ashen footprints. I had not noticed them when I came up. They were small and gray-black, pressed into the steps one after another. She was alive. She had to be. Then a loud sound shook the house. It was like an explosion without fire, a heavy blast that hit the walls and floor at once. The symbols on the walls began to glow red. The whole house filled with crimson light. I ran back downstairs. As I passed the bathroom again, the towel was still on the floor, but now it was red. Soaked, the basement door was open. Her footprints led straight to it. I had to find her. The basement was dark, but red light came from inside it. It glowed from below, though I still could not see past the blackness. Then I heard her crying. She was down there, weeping in the dark. "I'm coming," I said, though my voice barely sounded like mine. The humming was deafening as I stepped onto the stairs. It was deep and low, shaking the walls so hard that black dust fell from them in thin, drifting sheets. The ash peeled away like dead skin. But through it all, I could still hear her crying. Then the humming stopped. I was in the basement. I could barely see. The red glow only showed the shapes of things, the couch, the shelves, the old boxes, the bar in the corner. Everything was just a dark outline against the red. Then I heard footsteps. Fast, light, skittering footsteps. They moved behind me. Then they were on the walls. Then on the ceiling. The red light grew brighter. I could see more. I saw her. She was on the bar, surrounded by vodka bottles. She was crouched low, with both hands pressed in front of her, like an animal ready to jump. Her head tilted to one side, as if she was curious about me. "Addie?" I whispered. I should not have said her name. She sprang off the bar like a cat. Bottles shattered around her as she vanished back into the dark. I could not see her anymore. I needed the breaker. I had to find the breaker and turn the lights on. In one corner of the basement, I saw a ram's head. It was black, almost only a shadow, but the red light shaped it enough for me to know what it was. Beside it, a shadowed hand lifted. The fingers were long and ended in claws. It pointed toward the opposite corner. There, I saw a goat's head. Both figures stood still, watching me. Then the goat-headed thing slowly raised its arm, too. The skittering footsteps ran behind me again. I turned, searching for my wife. I had to get her out of there. I had to bring her back upstairs. But behind the bar, something moved. Something covered in scales. The red light reflected off its body. I saw one eye, round and flat like a fisheye, staring at me. Then it began to vomit. A thick black liquid poured over the bar and onto the floor. It kept coming. The basement began to flood with it. The smell hit me hard. It smelled like rotten alcohol, sour stomach acid, and old vodka. The ram-headed figure was gone. In its place, my wife clung to the ceiling, upside down. Her body stuck there like a spider. Her head hung loose, swaying as if it was attached by a thin string. Her eyes shone like mirrors in the red light as she looked down at me. Then she screamed. Her mouth opened wider than any human mouth should open. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed. I wanted to answer, but I could not. I had to leave. I could not reach her. The black vomit was already up to my waist. I fought my way back upstairs. The symbols were everywhere now, glowing red across the walls. In the kitchen stood a figure surrounded by crimson light. It had both ram and goat horns. Its body was covered in scales. It stood on hooves. Its fur was spotted. On its lower body, where no face should be, there was the face of a man with his eyes rolled back and his mouth hanging open. "Be not afraid," the figure said. Its voice was thick and wet, like it was speaking through blood and gravel. I should not have understood it, but I did. Then I heard that skittering sound again. My wife was on the figure's back now, clinging to it like a frightened child or a hunting spider. "Be not afraid." I knew those words. I had heard somewhere that the phrase was said again and again in the Bible. Was this an angel? Ezekiel had written about creatures with many faces, had he not? 4 faces. What were they? I could not remember. "What are you?" I asked. "A messenger," it said. "A messenger of what? What is happening to my wife?" "A vision," it said. "Futures, repentance is its cure." "Through me, lust, gluttony," my wife screamed from its back. "Where is what we once had?" I knew those words. She had said them on our 5th anniversary. I had forgotten the night. I had been drunk, too drunk to care the way I should have cared. Why was I always drunk? "Repentance," I said quickly. "Okay, I'll do anything." "The 4th cardinal," the figure said. "Wade the bile. Forbid pestilence." My wife leaped off its back and ran on all 4s. Her hands slapped against the blackened floor as she crashed into the basement door. I followed her. The basement stairs were black again. Below, I could see red light reflecting on the flood of vomit. The smell of vodka rose up thick and hot. When I reached the bottom, I saw myself. Not one version of myself. Countless versions. They were kneeling in the black bile. Their eyes were dark and round like the mouths of bottles. They scooped the foul liquid into their mouths with both hands, drinking like starving animals. Every single one of them stared at me while they drank. I stepped into the fluid. It closed around my legs. My copies began swimming toward me. Their hands grabbed at me under the surface. Many hands. Too many. Their mouths hung open as they clung to my legs, letting the bile drift into them with every step I took. They tried to hold me back from reaching the fourth corner of the basement, the south corner. They pulled at me, trying to drag me under and drown me in the filth. I looked up. My wife was on the ceiling again. She followed me as I moved, her neck bent backward in a way that should have broken it. She looked down at me and smiled. Somehow, seeing her there kept me above the surface. I kept moving. In the corner stood a man. He had the same face I had seen on the creature upstairs. His eyes burned like fire inside black, burnt sockets. Pus and clear fluid ran from them. As soon as I reached him, he dropped into the bile and disappeared beneath it. I looked down and saw his flaming eyes staring up at me through the dark liquid. His mouth opened, and the vomit began to whirlpool into it. He spoke without moving his lips. "Thy gluttony consumed." The walls shook. My copies began to wail. One by one, they twisted into nothing and vanished like smoke. The liquid drained away. When I turned around, the figure was there again. It raised one clawed finger toward the ceiling. "The ideals of Lamech," it said. "Observe the second consort. Forbid indulgence." I heard my wife rush up the stairs, her shape only a blur in the red light. I followed her. The bathroom light was still on, but now the door was closed. Bright light shone from the gap beneath it. Something foamy and wet leaked across the floor. It looked like soap mixed with water and oil. The light reflected in it so strongly that it hurt my eyes. I could not see my wife. I opened the bathroom door. There was a woman inside. She was naked, sitting on the toilet with her body spread open. Her hands moved over her skin. Her nails dragged across herself, leaving red lines behind. Soap and oil covered her body. Her hair was wet. She looked at me with longing eyes. For one terrible moment, I wanted her. I could have done it right then. And that thought cut through me worse than fear. Why could I not be that way with my own wife the night before? A gray hand slammed the bathroom door shut. My wife's face was right in front of mine. Tears poured from her cloudy, dead eyes. Her swollen gray skin folded around her face, the tears mixed with thick fluid leaking from her eyes and nose. The smell was horrible. She had always smelled so sweet when she was alive. Clean, warm, familiar. Now she smelled like rot and sickness. "What do they all have that I don't?" she screamed. Then she sobbed, and the sound broke something inside me. She grabbed at her hair with both hands. Her beautiful blonde hair. She pulled hard, ripping out locks of it while she wailed. A growl came from the basement, deep, rolling, animal. I looked past her and saw two eyes low to the floor. Heavy shoulders moved behind them as the thing came closer. When I looked back at my wife, she was smiling. The smile was too wide. It stretched her rotten skin until it began to split. Her teeth were yellow. Her gums were black. She was still crying, but I had not seen her smile like that in years. She nodded slowly, staring at me as the growling behind her grew louder. Nails scratched against the floor. Then my wife threw the bathroom door open. The growl became a roar. A leopard rushed in and pounced on the naked woman. I watched as it tore her apart. My wife cheered beside me. She screamed and clapped like a child watching fireworks. She jumped up and down, and each time her feet hit the floor, they made a wet, squelching sound. The woman screamed and reached toward me for help, but I could not move. The leopard tore into her chest. Blood sprayed across the bathroom. It lifted its head, pulling strings of flesh and muscle with its teeth. Then it buried its face lower, biting and ripping until the woman's screams broke into choking sounds. The leopard looked at me. Its mouth was red and open. Pieces of flesh hung from its teeth. "Thy lust consumed," it said. My wife knelt beside the leopard and stroked its fur. It purred and rubbed its head against her rotten thigh. She kissed it, smearing blood across her face. Then she rubbed the blood in with her fingers and pushed them into her mouth to taste it. I wanted my wife back. This was not my wife. She ran off again, moving on the tips of her toes like a sneaky child. The leopard followed her. From the basement, the man with the burning eyes emerged. They were all going upstairs. The whole house shook. I ran after them. In the bedroom, my wife was on her knees. She bowed low with her forehead pressed to the carpet. The figure had split apart again. The ram, the fish, and the goat stood around her, their arms forming a triangle. The leopard and the flame-eyed man stepped into the middle of it. The floor began to crack. The same symbol from the walls carved itself into the wood. It glowed brighter than all the others. Lines of red light spread across the room, filling it with a burning glow. Fire burst up around the figures. The flames rose high, twisting into hot, bright pillars. They wrapped around the leopard and the man. Shadows moved across their bodies, covering them, then pulling away to reveal something new. The man was gone. The leopard had changed. It stood tall now, covered in patterned fur. Its face was feline, but not like any animal I had ever seen. Its orange eyes burned with light. The same symbol glowed on its forehead. A long tail moved behind it in the fire. Wings grew from its back, wide and feathered, their tips shaped like flames. They were beautiful and terrible. Grand, powerful, I thought. This is an angel. God had come to save me. God had come to save my wife. "Can you save her?" I asked. The angel flapped its wings, and heat rolled through the room. My wife knelt inside the flames, crying, "Save her," the angel said. "Save thyself. Thou art beyond forgiveness. Grace garnered, I offer. Commit to her. Commit to me." My wife stood. Sobbing, she walked deeper into the fire and screamed as the flames touched her body. The angel reached out one clawed hand and called me forward without words. It wanted me to walk through the fire, too. The bed was burning now. My wife crawled into it, screaming, "Through thy devotion thou shalt banish sin's corruption," the angel said. "Cleanse in my flames. Awake anew." She pulled the covers over herself as she burned. The clock on the nightstand read 64:36 a.m. I stepped into the fire. It swallowed me. My skin blistered and peeled. My flesh popped and split. Fluid ran from me. My body charred. My eyes melted, and everything went black. I could not find my way through the burning dark. Then I felt a soft paw press against my back. It pushed me forward gently. I reached out with raw hands and felt the covers. I had found the bed. The blanket lifted. The paw guided me down. I could feel heat on my teeth because my lips were gone. Something tucked me in. I melted into the mattress. My flesh joined with it. I was dying. But I believed I would see her in heaven. The angel had saved her. It had saved me. It had saved us. Thank you, God, I thought. Then I heard her voice. "Wake up, dear." She was alive. My wife was alive. Sunlight came through the window and fell across her blonde hair. It shone like gold. Her skin was clean and soft. Her eyes sparkled as she leaned over me in bed. She was alive. I cried harder than I had ever cried before. I pulled her into my arms and held her so tightly that her confused questions turned into muffled sounds against my chest. I felt her heartbeat. She was warm again. I wish everyone could understand what it feels like to touch the warm skin of someone you love after feeling that same skin cold and dead. She felt light again, like she was carrying part of her own weight, like I was only holding a feather that had fallen from an angel's wing. She was grace. I had been given grace. When our faces pulled apart, I looked into her eyes and saw her soul again. I had always known she was beautiful, but now that beauty felt endless because I had seen what the world looked like without it. She was whole again, my beautiful wife. I promised myself I would never take a single moment with her for granted again. I would love her forever. She had never looked more beautiful to me, never more divine. She was sacred. She had been restored. But it had not only been a nightmare. It had not been a dream. That morning, I went downstairs to keep my first promise. I went to the bar in the basement to pour every bottle down the drain. The basement smelled awful, like a distillery that had been vomited up and left to rot. The drywall was damaged halfway up, as if black water had flooded the room during the night. When I came back upstairs, soap, oil, and water were leaking from under the bathroom door. I opened it and found blood on the toilet, along with clumps of yellow fur. I sent my wife out to get her hair done, her beautiful blonde hair. I hated letting her leave my sight, but I needed to clean the house before she saw anything. What if she remembered? What if some part of her knew what had happened? I scrubbed every room. I found ash beneath our bed, buried deep in the carpet. There were smoke stains on the ceiling. The symbols still showed faintly on the walls, only slightly lighter than the paint around them. I scrubbed them until my arms hurt. Then I got into the shower. That was when I saw the mark. There was a brand on my back where the paw had touched me. It was a circle with letters around the edge. Inside it were 2 wings and 3 crosses. The same holy symbol I had seen all over the house. The symbol of the angel. When I saw it in the mirror, everything came back. Not like a memory, but like I was there again. I remembered every sound, every smell, every face, every step. I remembered the basement, the bile, the copies of myself drinking from it. I remembered the bathroom, the leopard, my wife's screams, the fire, the bed, and the angel's paw against my back. Time felt broken when I thought about it. Sometimes it felt like it was happening right then. Sometimes it felt like I was only remembering it. Maybe that was the nature of the angel. It did not belong to one time. It saw all times at once. It made me see them too. The angel will not let me forget what my wife became. It will not let me forget what I almost lost. It has marked me, so I will remember my oath. I will commit myself to my wife by committing myself to the angel. The mark reminds me of its correction, its forgiveness, its warning. I am grateful, holy angel. You brought my wife back to me. My beautiful wife. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I will never stop saying it. I have written this down as it came to me, sometimes like a memory, and sometimes like something happening again in front of my eyes. That was how the angel worked. It moved through past, present, and future, all at once. I hope whoever reads this understands the warning. I am thankful for what the angel did, but I pray no one else ever has to see the things I saw. I pray no one else ever has to witness the forms of the leopard angel. Fix your future while you still can. Repent before the night comes. Because if you do not, you may wake in the dark beside the person you love most, find them cold and dead, and look at the clock to see the impossible time waiting there. 64:36 am. Story 5. I did not know I was being interviewed. That is the part my mind keeps returning to, again and again, like a finger touching a bruise. My flight had been delayed for 4 hours. I was sitting at an airport bar, tired, empty, and halfway drunk, working through my third bourbon while too many television screens flashed silently above the counter. The place was bright in that cold airport way, full of people pretending they were fine with waiting, but there was no real quiet anywhere. Just wheels rolling over tile, boarding announcements, glasses hitting the bar, and voices that all seemed to blend into one tired sound. A man sat down on the stool beside me and ordered a glass of water. He never drank it. That was the first thing I noticed. Not his clothes, not his face, not his voice. Just the water sitting in front of him, clear and still, while I kept drinking like there was something at the bottom of my glass that could make the night easier. My mother had died 3 weeks before that. I had been away dealing with her house, her papers, her bills, and all the strange little pieces a person leaves behind when they are suddenly gone. Now I was flying back to my apartment, back to a place that still felt like it belonged to someone else, back to a life that did not feel like mine anymore. I was not doing well. I was also drunk enough to talk to a stranger. The man turned slightly toward me and said, "You look like someone with questions." He was not tall. He was not short. He was not handsome or ugly in any clear way. He looked like someone you might forget 5 minutes after seeing him, except that I could not really hold his face in my mind. Every time I tried to focus on one detail, it seemed to move away from me. His face was like something seen from the corner of your eye, clear until you looked straight at it. "Everyone in an airport has questions," I said. "That is true," he said. "But most people here are wondering when their flight will board. You are asking something older than that. I should have stood up and left. I should have paid my bill, walked to my gate, and never spoken to him again." But grief makes the world feel strange, and alcohol makes strange things feel interesting. So I stayed. We talked for a long time. I do not remember every word, but I remember the shape of the conversation. He asked about my mother. He asked about the end. He asked if her fear had meant anything. He asked if hope had helped her, or if hope had only made the dying harder because it kept her reaching for a future that was never coming. He asked if the promises people make about redemption, peace, and reward after suffering are comforting truths or cruel lies. He asked if pain only matters when something comes after it to balance the scales, or if pain is sometimes just pain, with no meaning hiding behind it. I did not have good answers. I was not even sure there were good answers. But he did not seem to mind. He did not push me, and he did not seem bored. He asked each question slowly, as if he were holding it under a light and turning it from side to side, checking it from angles I had never thought about before. He listened like my answers mattered, even when they were broken and half drunk. When my flight was finally called, I looked up at the screen. The gate had changed. People were already standing and gathering their bags. When I turned back to say something to him, the stool beside me was empty. The glass of water was still there, still full, and when I brushed my fingers near it, the glass felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with ice. For months after that, I thought about him now and then. I thought of him as a strange man from a sad night. Nothing more. Just one of those odd people you meet while traveling. Someone who appears, says something that stays with you, and disappears before you can decide whether the meeting meant anything. I know now that it meant everything. I know now that I was being tested. The dreams began 2 months later. There was no warning, no reason I could point to. Nothing changed in my life that week. I went to work. I came home. I ate badly. I slept badly. I carried grief around like a stone in my chest. Then one night I closed my eyes, and I was somewhere else. I want to explain the kind of dream it was, because it did not feel like a normal nightmare. Nightmares usually arrive with fear already inside them. You know from the first second that something is wrong. This was different. It felt almost like an invitation. I was standing in a room I had never seen before. One half of it looked freshly repaired. The wall was clean and newly painted, and the floor there looked swept. The other half was ruined. Dark mildew spread across the wall like a slow stain. The ceiling sagged. The air smelled damp, old, and closed in. In the center of the room, two figures sat across from each other at a chessboard. I knew at once that I should not be there. At the same time, I knew just as strongly that I was exactly where I was meant to be. One of the figures was the man from the airport bar, the man with the untouched glass of water. He did not look at me. He simply reached forward and moved a piece across the board with calm, careful fingers. There was no hurry in him. He moved like someone who had never been late for anything in his entire existence, no matter how long that existence had been. The other figure was someone I did not know. I say someone because I do not know what else to call it. It looked almost human, but not in a way I could trust. Its shoulders seemed softer than the other man's. Its presence felt quieter, kinder, maybe, or at least like something trying very hard to be kind in a place where kindness had no real power. Neither of them looked at me. Neither of them spoke to me. I stood there and watched them play. I do not know how long it lasted. In the dream, it felt like hours. The chessboard did not behave the way a normal board should. Pieces moved in ways I could not understand. Sometimes a piece was taken, and even though nothing dramatic happened on the board itself, the air in the room changed. It would grow colder or heavier, or sharp enough that breathing felt difficult. Each time the gentler figure lost a piece, its face tightened just slightly. Then I woke up. At first, I thought the dream was only a dream. Then I felt the wetness on my sleeve. There was a thin cut across my left forearm. It was clean and straight, about 3 inches long. It was not deep enough to send me running to the hospital, but it was deep enough to bleed through the sleeve of my shirt before I noticed it. I had no idea how it had happened. There was nothing sharp in my bed, no broken glass, no nails sticking out from the frame. I checked everything. I checked it twice. There was no explanation. 4 nights later, it happened again. Same room, same chessboard, same two figures sitting across from each other as if they had been there long before I arrived and would remain there long after I left. This time, when I woke, the cut was near my collarbone. It was shallow, more like a careful scratch than a serious wound, but it was real. I started keeping a journal after that, not because I thought anyone would believe me. I knew how it would sound. I knew how I would sound. I wrote it down because I needed to see the pattern outside my own head. I needed proof that I was not changing the memories each time I thought about them. I needed dates, details, and marks I could look back on. Over 6 weeks, I had 11 dreams. After each one, I woke with a wound. None of them were life-threatening. None of them were dramatic enough to make someone immediately believe in something impossible. A line across my ribs, a cut along my shoulder, a small mark near my wrist. But every one of them was real. Every one of them hurt. Every one of them bled. Early on, before I understood even a little of what was happening, I went to a doctor. I told her I had been waking up with unexplained cuts. She was kind, but careful. She asked if I had been under stress. She asked if I might be hurting myself in my sleep. She asked if I had ever woken up confused, or if I drank often, or if I had thoughts of harming myself. I understood why she was asking. I told her no, I was telling the truth. I do not think she fully believed me. I do not blame her. After that, I stopped going to doctors. There was nothing they could tell me that would help. There was nothing they could name that would make the room, the board, or the wounds less real. On the 12th dream, the gentler figure looked up. It looked directly at me. For the first time, I felt what it meant to be noticed in that place. It was not like someone turning their head in a room. It felt more like pressure building in the air around me, like something far away had seen me and sent its attention forward before its eyes arrived. "You have been watching for some time," it said. Its voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It filled the room completely, the way water fills the shape of any container. "I don't know why," I said. That was the only honest answer I had. "No," it said. "I imagine you don't." The man from the airport did not look up from the chessboard. He moved another piece. Somewhere far away, in the real world, I felt something happen because of that move. I cannot explain how I knew. It was like feeling a storm shift before the clouds arrive. "What is this?" I asked. "What am I doing here?" "You are the arbiter," the gentler figure said, as if that should have explained everything. "The game requires a witness who is not a player, someone outside the game, but close enough to confirm that what happens here carries weight in your world." I didn't agree to this, no, it said softly. There was something in its voice that sounded almost like sympathy. Or maybe it was something colder pretending to be sympathy. I could not tell, and I think that was part of the horror. "Very few of you agree," it said. "The role finds people who can hold an uncomfortable truth without looking away from it. You showed that ability once in a conversation about your mother with someone who was testing you without your knowledge. The cold that moved through me then had nothing to do with the room." "The wounds," I said. "Why do I wake up hurt?" "Because witnessing has a cost," it said. "It always has. In every belief your kind has ever built, those who stand near the hidden things pay for being close. The ones who watch the gods, the ones who carry messages, the ones who see what others cannot see, they pay in some kind of currency. Sometimes they lose their sanity. Sometimes they lose their sight. For you, the cost is skin." It paused, then glanced toward the man across the board. "I did not choose that cost. Neither did he. It is simply the shape it takes. We did not create it to be cruel. We did not create it at all. It simply is." "That is not an answer," I said. "That is just a description." For a moment, something almost like a smile moved across its face. "You are already better at this than most," it said. "Most people accept the first explanation they are given. You are asking what sits underneath it." There was one question I had been afraid to ask since the second dream. "Can I stop?" The man with the untouched water finally looked up. His eyes were the same as they had been in the airport bar. Patient, bold, completely untouched by hurry. "You could try," he said. "You could close your eyes. But closing your eyes does not end a dream that is not yours to control. You could refuse to sleep, but your body will not allow that forever. You could ask someone to wake you every time your eyes begin to move beneath your eyelids, and I would still be waiting the next time exhaustion takes you. So the answer is no, he said, almost gently. Not because we are cruel, because the position exists whether you want it or not. You were chosen because of who you already are. That does not stop being true just because you wish it would." I stared at them both. "What are you?" I asked. "I need to ask it clearly. Is this heaven and hell? Are you God and the devil? Is this something else? Something that does not belong to this world at all?" The man almost smiled. Names, he said, are something your kind needs more than we do. That is not an answer, no, the gentler one said. It is not. We have been called many things by many people across a very long time. None of the names were fully wrong. None of them were complete either. That was all I ever got. I have stopped expecting more. In my own mind, I call them the visitor and the resident. I do not know if those names are right, but they are the only names I have. I no longer try to force them into shapes I understand. I do not think they fit into any shape the human mind was made to hold. The 13th dream was different. At first, everything seemed the same. The half-clean, half-ruined room. The air that smelled of paint and rot. The chessboard in the center. The visitor and the resident sitting across from each other, moving pieces in silence. Then I noticed another table in the corner. I did not understand how I had missed it before. It stood off to the side, covered in something like cloth. On it was a second board, smaller than the main one. There were fewer pieces on it, and most of them had already been removed. The visitor moved a dark pawn on the main board. It was simple and plain, the kind of piece no one thinks about for long. He lifted it between two fingers and placed it on the smaller table, beside other captured pieces. "What is that?" I asked. "The second board, a finished game," the resident said quietly. "It ended some time ago. We keep the pieces. It seems disrespectful not to." I moved closer without meaning to. The smaller table pulled at me. It felt like a word I almost remembered, or a song I had not heard since childhood. The captured pieces were lined up neatly along the edge. One of the pawns had a face carved into it. I knew it was her before my mind fully understood what I was seeing. It was the kind of recognition that happens below thought. The part of me that knew my mother's face before I ever knew the word mother knew that small carved face at once. The tilt of the head, the shape of the shoulders, the way the little wooden figure leaned slightly forward, like she used to lean when she was listening closely to someone she loved. "That's her," I said. My voice sounded wrong. Small, broken, "That's my mother, the resident," did not look away from me. "Yes," it said. "This is the game that ended," I said. "The one with her piece in it." "Yes." I stood there, staring at the small wooden version of my mother sitting among rows of captured pieces in a room that did not exist in the world I had always believed was the only world. "How?" I asked. "How does a piece get captured? What does that mean? What did it mean for her?" The visitor answered, and his voice was not unkind. Somehow that made it worse. "Capture means the piece is removed from play," he said. "What that becomes in your world changes from case to case. Sometimes it is small. A door that stays locked when it should have opened. A phone call that is missed. A car that starts 1 minute too late. Sometimes it is much larger." He looked at the small piece on the table. "Your mother's piece was taken 11 years before you sat beside me in that airport bar. I believe that in your world it became a diagnosis that came 6 months too late. A delayed referral. A scan that was misread. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. You are telling me my mother died because of a move in a chess game. I am telling you that the game and your world are not as separate as you want them to be," the visitor said. "I am not telling you that I caused it directly. I am not telling you that I enjoyed it. I am not telling you it was personal in a way that would make your anger easier to aim. I am telling you the game has weight. That weight falls somewhere. Sometimes it falls on people you love." Before I could stop myself, I picked up the carved pawn. I